This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the Executive Chairman and Director of Generation Mining, Mr. Kerry Knoll. Kerry, how are you this afternoon?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. Anyone that's been in the resource space is familiar with your past, your successes. Can you provide a bit of that background to those that may be new to the Generation Mining story or the resource space? You know, we're finally at a point in the space where we're having new sets of eyes and new blood per se. So can you provide some context as to your background and the many successes you've had, Kerry?
Yeah, of course. So, well, going way back, I was a journalist, and I wound up at a newspaper called the Northern Miner, and I was editor of their magazine. They had a magazine then, and I was the editor of that for a few years. And then what happened was I wrote this big feature on this new way of recovering gold called heap leaching, which is now responsible for about half of the world's gold, or at least it was at one point. And oddly enough, there was no heap leaching going on in Canada, and Canada was the third largest gold producing country in the world. And I just thought that was really odd. So I asked a bunch of mining companies here in Canada why there wasn't any, and they all said that it was too cold in Canada. So I went down to visit a mine in Idaho that was, and it was 35 below zero, and they were heap leaching away. And I thought, well, that's not true.
Right.
It's just funny how people are slow to adapt to new technology, and in some cases. And so I left my job in 1987 with the goal of starting the first heap leach mine in Canada. That was why I did it. And I was also a little bit fed up with the junior mining companies. They're actually a lot better today than they were then, but back in those days, the juniors, they weren't interested in building mines. They were interested in selling stock, and mostly selling their own stock. So, you know, that kind of all disappointed me. So I also wanted to be the guy who had a junior company and actually built it into a mining company. So I incorporated my first company. It was called Glencairn Gold. Mm-hmm. I had Glencairn for 20 years. I was president of it. And over that time, well, we first of all built a small diamond mine in Brazil that didn't make any money. And then we spun out a new subsidiary called Wheaton River. And that was in 1991. And in Wheaton River, we did what I set out to do. We built the first heap leach mine in Canada. And that was the Golden Bear mine. And it was very successful. We were producing gold for $125 an ounce. Mm. It wasn't a big mine, but, you know, we made up to 100,000 ounces one year. And we in 2001 or two, we caught the attention of Frank Justra, and he put some money into the company. He's a mining billionaire, I guess, today. And he brought in some other people, Pierre Lassonde and Ian Telfer and Frank Holmes, and there was a group of them. And so
that group has done well for itself. Not to cut in there, Kerry, but please continue.
Yeah, so we eventually they took control of it, and they used that as a vehicle and started buying up other mining companies, and eventually bought up Gold Corp and changed the Wheaton River name to Gold Corp. And at that time was within about 3 years became the largest cap gold mining company in the world. And they also spun out another company called Silver Wheaton, which is now called Wheaton Precious Metals. And Randy Smallwood, the president of that company, which is, I think, a $20 billion company on its own. Randy was one of our top geologists at Wheaton River. So Randy's worked for the Wheaton name for longer than anybody, for almost 30 years. Anyway, so Glencairn at that time was basically a holding company, and then in 2002 decided it was time for it to become a mining company as well. So we acquired a project in Central America, in Costa Rica, and got it permitted and got the mine built, and acquired a couple of other mines in Nicaragua. and in 2007 got taken over by B2 Gold, at which time we had 3 operating mines and about 1,200 employees. And that was, 2007. And then kind of in the meantime, after we got, those guys took control of Wheaton River from us, in 2004, we started a new company called Blue Pearl Mining. And we wanted to get into the molybdenum space. And famously, Blue Pearl, we came out at 10 cents a share. And within about a year, we were trading at about $2.50 a share because the price of molybdenum went through the roof. We acquired the largest undeveloped molybdenum project in Canada.
It's a great way to never have to buy a drink again, huh, Kerry?
No, people were buying us things. Well, it went to $2.50 a share, and then we did a reverse takeover of the largest private mining company in the U.S. called Thompson Creek, which we raised $700 million to purchase, and which is to this day the largest raise of any junior mining company ever in Canada. And we bought a company called Thompson Creek that was making $1 million profit a day back in those days.
Wow.
And our shares became a market darling, and molybdenum kept going up. And so eventually we were trading at $24 a share within 2 years of coming out at a dime.
Yeah.
So that was a good one.
That's a heck of a resume, Kerry. Obviously, you know, from your feature on heap leach, the heap leaching process to the multiple successes, big successes, by the way. You like projects with scale, and you like being early to ideas, and you obviously know how to monetize those, which brings me to generation mining. So, you know, I look at generation mining and I tell you what attracts me to it. Obviously, the after-tax net present value of the Marathon Palladium project being about 1.55 billion Canadian, give or take, right? And the
Yep.
the current market cap at 45 million. There's a lot of runway and there's a lot of disconnect there. So let me ask you, with all of that success, you could be anywhere in the world, having a great time, enjoying a drink. What attracted you to the Marathon deposit and generation mining in particular?
Well, what happened let me go back a little bit. So with that molybdenum story I told, what it was very apparent to me was, first of all, focus on the commodity. Figure out, and it's not that hard, figure out which commodities are going to be in short supply, and look around when they're out of favor and buy them.
Yep.
And you got to be able to write a check, of course. So I was able to do that. So then, so in 2004, we chose molybdenum. In 2009, I got into the lithium business. In 2014, I got into nickel, which had a short-lived rally, but it had the rally nevertheless. In 2016, got into zinc, and it had a rally. It went up to $1.60. And we sold that company to Osisko Metals. And Generation was a spin-out of a company that we sold to Osisko in 2018. And we call it Generation Mining. And the reason I call it Generation Mining is so that we want to build a mine that will last for at least a generation. And so we were looking for big. One of the early mistakes I made in my career was a lot of our mines had 6 and 8 year mine lives, and it's not of interest to other companies to acquire you if you have a short mine life. So right. we started looking. We looked at cobalt, and I was looking really hard at vanadium and looking at some of the other nickel again, and looked at the fundamentals for palladium, and I had never seen as good fundamentals for any metal in my entire career. And I've been, a gold bug for over 40 years now. And the reason is because the world, there were virtually no mines under construction. There was none that are other than Platreef that's near to production, and yet it's a metal that is required to be in every car sold in the world. So the government is saying you can't sell a car without this metal, and yet there's not enough of it. It was just a recipe for for the price to go up. And so at that point, I think palladium was trading around $900 or $1,000. And Jamie, the president of Generation, kept showing me different palladium projects, but none of them were any good. And then he showed me Marathon, and I was like, holy crap. This is big. This is on the Trans-Canada Highway. It's got, I have a checklist of about 26 items that have to have 100% rating in order for me to buy a project.
Sure.
Metallurgy, dimensions of the ore body, the local environmental situation, the socioeconomic, the natives, the local town, all of these different things have to check on the list. And this one checked everything. And so we called up Sabani in January of 19 and told them we'd like to buy it. And they said, well, you know what, it's for sale. So we negotiated a price, and we were able to get it before palladium had its big run up. And so our timing was good. And, we've come out with the numbers. One thing I'm not very good at is I don't think I'm a really good promoter. So but the shares in my company tend to lag for a while until they really catch on. And once they catch on, they catch on. But I think that this one, its time is coming, because we're doing a feasibility study now, and I think we'll get re-rated when the numbers of that come out.
Agreed. And just for some context, and we went over it last week with Jamie, but there's over 3.8 million ounces of palladium. For those not familiar with palladium, it's trading $100 higher than the gold spot price right now, right? So you have 1826 palladium right now. So you have 3.8 million ounces of palladium. There's a platinum credit there that's not insignificant, 1.2 million ounces. Both of those are in the measured and indicated category. You have nearly 500,000 ounces of gold in the measured and indicated categories. And just for kicks, 1 billion pounds of copper in the measured and indicated categories. So, again, I look at the market cap, it's 45 million, 13.9 million of that, I believe, is in cash. And again, there's very, very solid economics tied to this. So let's talk about what it looks like moving forward and what the end game is, which I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I have to believe that you plan on monetizing this. And I imagine that with the economics tied to it, with the community relations you have, with the metallurgy, the recoveries, and the upcoming catalyst, isn't going to be the most difficult thing for Generation, given the network and the extensive set of contacts that you and the team have. But can you paint a picture for me, Kerry, about what the next few quarters look like for Generation? Because I think they're important ones for the company.
Yeah, so there's multiple things happening. Obviously, the most important one for us is the feasibility study. And we're using tier one firms. We want to make sure that we know exactly how much this is going to cost. It's well known in the business that if you're selling a project, you use certain companies to do your studies, and if you're going to build a project, you use a different set of companies.
Right.
So we're planning to build it. So we are definitely using tier one companies, and we'll be announcing the list of those companies shortly. We've already announced a couple of them. So that's Plan A. Plan B is to get our permits, and permits are probably our biggest time lag towards production. We think it's going to take us a couple of years, and there's a lot of work involved, but we think it's eminently permittable because it's, first of all, it's a clean mine as mines go. There's no acid rock drainage or other deleterious elements that are going to go into the rivers. That's probably that's a big thing on my checklist when we look at projects. Number two, the local town is almost dying. It's gone from 5,000 to 3,000 people because the local mines have been running out of ore, and they're very solidly behind this project as well. So you've got the people behind it, and you've got the you've got the right project to get permitted. So that'll be an ongoing thing, and there will be landmarks announced as that's going along. The third thing we're doing, and it's not as if we need more tons, because in our PEA we only used about 37% of the tons measured and indicated that we had on the property.
Right.
So there's a lot more rock there that we could put into a mining plan. It's probably not quite as economic. It's a little deeper or a little further away, but we don't need to find another deposit that's 1.5 grams of palladium equivalent. But what we're looking for, and so this is where our exploration comes in, is there's been a few rocks found on this property that are very, very high grade, massive sulfide palladium, as high as 200 grams per ton of palladium and 9% copper.
Wow.
And it's thought that these came from a deeper deposit. So what would have happened is a deposit somewhere in the plumbing system would have formed back in the day when these were all these volcanoes were happening and forming the various deposits on our property. And it's thought that one of those deposits was very rich down below somewhere, and that a subsequent volcanic event brought parts of that to surface or to higher up in the system. And so we're looking deeper in the system for the source of those boulders. And we did some seismic work last year, and we're doing something called magnetotellurics this year, and that's what you're talking about, the press release we just came out with. Magnetotellurics is a method that takes the electromagnetic field of the Earth and looks at it from the bottom up, and it can go very deep, a lot deeper than most geophysics. And interestingly, the discovery by Impala called Sunday Lake, which is not that far from us, was made using magnetotellurics. And magnetotellurics has never been used on our property. So, and also up until we came along, nobody had ever drilled deep on our property. Like this is like 1,000 meters down we'll be looking, and nobody had ever looked that deep before. So we're looking for a deep, very high grade deposit. And that could be a game changer for us if we're able to find it. It's of course exploration, and there's never any guarantees. But we do have rocks that indicate there is or was a very rich deposit somewhere. So it's a detective game. We're looking for it. We've got some drill targets. We're going to do the MT work this summer, and then we're going to drill.
And these MT deposits and the drilling that's going to happen are on the Sally deposit, correct?
We have a big anomaly on the Sally deposit. That's one of our targets.
Okay.
The other main one is the richest. There's 4 zones on our property. There's the Sally, the Geordie, the main zone, and then something called the W horizon, which is right next to the main zone.
Right.
And the W horizon is the richest of all of them. It's not that big, but it's rich. And so that has not been fully delineated. And it's possible that there is if you can envisage a sink with a drain, with a trap underneath, it's such a trap that will form these small high-grade deposits that, for example, the Eagle nickel mine just south of us, it's one of Lundin Mining's projects, is such a trap. And we're thinking that possibly in the feeder zone that brought us the W horizon, if there is a trap down there somewhere, that could also be the source of a very rich deposit. And bear in mind that it doesn't have to be that rich to be worth a lot of money. In North American Palladium, which had about 6 years of reserves left, they're mining underground at just over 3 grams palladium equivalent, and they sold that company for $1 billion. So if we can find something 3, 4, 5 grams, could be a game changer for us.
A lot of runway between 45 million, the current market cap, and $1 billion, right?
Yes, for sure.
Excellent. Kerry, I know I've taken up a little bit of your time today. I want to thank you for that. I think the background is important. I think it's an exciting story that's not yet understood well. I suspect that will change in the coming months. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Obviously, I'm looking forward to having you back on as we get closer to results from the surveys and the drilling there that's forthcoming.
Not really. I think I just want to make sure that people understand that we're well financed. We did a raise in January, and we're financed to do this drilling, to do the feasibility study, to do the permitting. We're not going to need to go back to the market in the near future. So I think that people always want to know that, and I wanted to make sure everybody does know.
Absolutely. And you have some deep-pocketed shareholders, yourself included. Osisco's on board. Zebra Holdings is on board. Sibanye, Eric Sprott, pick of the litter, right? So, again, the network, I think, is going to be incredibly helpful for the end game, which is to sell this for a whole heck of a lot more than it's worth now.
I think so. I think that'll happen. I think somebody will be buying this company. I don't know whether that'll be after we build it or before we build it, but it doesn't really matter in the long term. This is going to be a nice addition to some company, perhaps a South African company who wants to diversify out of South Africa, perhaps a gold company that wants to stay in the precious metal space but doesn't want to have to go too far afield. We're in Canada. Nice tier 1 jurisdiction. So, yeah, I think there's going to be some interest at some point. But I think the feasibility study will tell that tale.
Agreed. No, great work. Kerry, thank you again.